Hello, Namaste. My name is Donna Bradley, and this teaching is from a class that I taught called Kundalini and Evolution. I believe that this is such an important topic because so many of us are waking up at once. It is my prayer that this teaching will help us all wake up more gracefully, more consciously. It's called Kundalini in America. So when I was a young child, perhaps 10 years old, I wrote in my journal, "There are little workmen inside my body." I know that's a strange word, workmen, but that's what I wrote. "There are little workmen inside my body building new highways to carry the extra love." Then when I was 33, I guess, a wave of warm liquid bliss traveled up my spine, and my reality changed completely and permanently. Suddenly, I knew the answer to every question about the universe. My mind just stopped working. It didn't need to figure out anything. I guess it would be more accurate to say that no more questions even existed. And I stayed in a bliss so intense that I couldn't walk or talk for weeks. I'd never meditated before, and I hadn't even heard of Kundalini. So people decided that I had experienced a stroke, since I'd been sick anyway. But I didn't care. I really didn't care because I was in bliss. Perhaps maybe 2 months later, I was so burned by the energy that I dropped out of the bliss and into a darkness so pervasive that I think I would have preferred to be dead. It was truly awful. I was so angry at myself. I guess I felt that God had bothered to give me the answers to all the questions in the world, and that I had somehow carelessly lost those answers. So I just truly crashed and burned for a while. But eventually, my body and my psyche gradually reset itself. At first, I could walk, but not as well as before. And I could talk, but not as well as before. I definitely could not think a thought. But I knew any answer that I needed. If somebody asked me the date of something that happened 5 years before, I knew. And then a few months later, I was new again, completely new. I was just radically alive. I was plugged in and full of awe. You know, everything I looked at was glistening, was glowing, literally. Like I remember driving down the highway with my husband, and I said, "Isn't it amazing the way those green leaves are glowing?" And he said, "What?" And I felt so sad that I cried. I wanted him and everyone else to see that glistening because it just never stopped. And I knew almost everyone's history before they told me, so I didn't even need to say, "How are you?" to people because I already knew, but I would ask them how they were to see if they knew. And I know that sounds egotistical, but it was not about me. It was just, I had access to every person's heart, every person's thoughts. And healing was flowing from my heart and my hands, sometimes physical and sometimes emotional, and I wouldn't even know it was happening, but people got well. It was stunning. And I saw patterns everywhere, and I know this is weird, but everything and everyone was related to everything and everyone else. And I even saw threads of light connecting people and events. And I saw colors in the place of numbers, and so I worked math problems by matching the colors. It confused me, but it was just so automatic. I just didn't care. And often friends reported seeing me in several places at once. And I know that's called bilocation. But I could always tell them exactly what we had said or what we had done. But I didn't remember being in two places at once. Those things happened beside each other, simultaneously. And you'll love this one, at least I did. Perhaps most fun of all is I literally felt orgasms in my heart first, and then gradually they were up in my throat. It made it really hard sometimes to talk to people. I remember one time a social worker showed up, and as I opened the door, I was just so glad to see her. We had adopted kids, and she was their worker that I loved. And I was so glad to see her that my throat just went off in an orgasm. My body was truly alive at every possible level. I know there are no words to really capture these events and explain them to you, but I know the truth of this because such events are always, every single time, accompanied by such sweet love and such deep peace. When you're really in this Kundalini place, when you're in this frequency, this vibration, it never feels scary. It never feels like a problem. It's always accompanied by sweet love and deep peace. Now, if I went back into my mind, then it could be scary. But as long as I stayed out of my mind, there was never a problem. And you'll probably be glad to know that all of this continues to be true 40 years later. Some of these phenomena are kind of, I'd say, in the background now. But they're always there when I need them. But what never dims, never goes away, never goes into the background, is that I continue to grow more and more love. And it's amazingly profound love. Love far beyond mere human logic. Divine love that flows through me like a force of nature. It is the force of nature. Oneness is another word that people use. It describes this ongoing state of being. I'd say that nothing is ever separate now. I'm not separate from anyone or anything. I'm not looking at the tree, I am the tree. I'm not enjoying the ocean, I am the ocean. And I am not only the people who I love so dearly in my personal life, but I am also the so-called stranger who I see standing on the street as I drive by. I know what they're thinking. I know where they put their keys that they think are lost. And I don't even know what the use of this is, but I'm just not separate from anyone else. You know, most of the time, I reap the harvest of this sacred energy because there is profound peace beyond circumstance, beyond anything that's going on in my life or even in the world. There is profound love that never, ever goes away, no matter what. There is love beyond reason or justification, not because someone does something to earn my love, but more because I am made of that love. Love is the animating source of me, and I have to let that love flow, or I will be electrocuted. There are also times when this bliss feels like too much. Time when the energy builds until I feel like I'm going to explode. There are times when I feel electrocuted, as if my body doesn't know how to carry this much voltage. I remember one of those times of overwhelm. It was probably about 8 years ago after the Kundalini first rose up my spine. It was back when the doctors still thought I'd had a stroke. And one day, in the midst of raising our 17 adopted and guardianship children, I ran out of my house, raised my arms to the sky, crying tears of frustration. I let myself down to the ground and I sobbed, "God, I need to know what is happening. I don't understand why I'm always on fire. Why is every bit of input into my brain magnified 1,000 times? How can I possibly raise these children when their every emotion is running through my body, my mind, my heart? This much love is melting me down, melting down my nervous system. I need an answer now." And finally, I guess I was just totally spent. I think I must have just surrendered, so I returned to the house. And as I walked in, my husband said, "There's a letter for you." So standing in the kitchen with the children swirling all around me, I opened the letter and read, "Dear Donna, you don't know me, but I recognize you. I've seen you teach and I've seen you love your children. I want you to know that you are not sick. You have not had a stroke. You are experiencing a heightened state of consciousness, which is called Kundalini. I want to help you understand that you represent the next stage of human evolution. Love, Barbara." Of course, I was stunned. As if I were in the protected eye of a hurricane, I stood totally silent in the midst of all of the laughter and tears that 17 children could produce. And so my husband came and he took my hand and he led me back to the office and he said, "Sit here. And oh yes, there was also a package for you." And he brought it to me. And since I was totally useless at that point, he opened the package for me and handed me a note from the box that said, "Donna, here is a book written by your spiritual mother." I had no idea what she meant, but I opened to a bookmarked page where my friend Sandra had underlined a passage written by the mother, who was Sri Aurobindo's companion. And the passage said, and can you believe this? "There are little highwaymen inside my body, building new highways to carry all this energy that is only love." Wow. Hers was written in French, but it was the exact same image that I had written in my journal when I was 10 years old. How could that be possible? And yes, I did notice that both the letter and the book arrived when I was outside pleading with God to help me understand what was happening to me. So this is where you come in. You also have little workmen inside of you. They're building new highways inside you to carry the new life force, the love. And exactly like me, until this integrates, you may not recognize the gift that you've been given. And like me, you might even think that it is a problem. You might call it being overly sensitive. Isn't that what our parents always told us? Or irritable, or even flashes of anger with emotional impulses too strong to control. Or you might be diagnosed with a physical illness or a mental illness, when in fact it is latent life force. Life force is waking up and driving out any blocks, any emotions, any beliefs which stand in its way. Do you understand that this energy that is running through your nervous system is sacred? That it's a blessing? That it's a deep honor? That it is God, Goddess, taking form through you? And I'm sure you know that ours is not a culture that helps us understand this process of a body integrating with the spirit, of a body waking up, of a mind quickening, Kundalini. And this is not a culture that reinterprets our experiences that we thought were terrifying, or overwhelming, or exhausting, so that we suddenly realize that we are being blessed. And this is definitely not a culture which tells us to honor our hyperactive kids and to explain to them that they're simply running more voltage, more electricity than they know how to balance gracefully. And this is not a culture that teaches us to meditate or dance or go to nature when we're feeling overamped. I know that most of you will not experience the same degree of intensity that I did, partially because this was so rarely seen in America, so little understood or honored. There was no one else around, no one that I knew of who had traveled this path, and so I was traveling this path alone. But now, look at us now. So many more people are waking up at once. You can have community. You can have support. You can understand what is happening to your mind and your body. You're being upgraded. Isn't that cool? Which leads me to my last point. There are degrees of intensity. Most people wake up more gradually and more gently than I did. Many of you are in a stage where you have very strong energies and urges running through you. Life feels so very extreme. Life as you have lived it is no longer enough to satisfy you. And yet you don't know how to get to the next stage gracefully. And at a certain point, your life seems to just be unraveling. You notice that activities that once excited you, they don't anymore. And foods that once seemed perfect no longer taste right or nourish you. And friends that seemed like such a match no longer seem to get who you are. Because this is the time when old ways of being no longer apply. Many of the mystics talk about this stage as being single file. That before this you've walked with your friends, but now it's just between you and your God. And this is because you are in the midst of being rewired, transformed. And I mean literally, not just spiritually. It would be so easy if it were just spiritually. But it's also mentally, emotionally, physically. Every brain function has shifted. Every hormone reacts differently. Every cell in your body now has new rules. Because there are new highways being built to carry the extra love, the extra life force, the extra energy. And these new highways are being built because you evolved. Your consciousness changed. And therefore your very cellular structure has also changed. Your very instructions for being have changed. These new highways are appearing in your hearts and in your physical brains. in your digestive systems. You are literally being upgraded at every level. Sri Aurobindo taught that humans are not the final stage of evolution, and thank God for that. He taught that the design for divine humanity is pulling us into more complexity, more simplicity, more capacity, and more divinity. Sri Aurobindo believed that humans are the conscious connection, the belief between animal and divine consciousness, and I don't know if I agree with that. I sense that all living things are expressions of different forms of divine consciousness. But I do agree, I do understand that we humans know that we know, and that's different from most other animals. And that knowing could be both the blessing and the curse. And I do agree with the mother and with Sri Aurobindo that we are designed to become divine humans, conscious humans. And in order to allow that transformation, we have to let the old instructions die. The instructions for how to live and even how to be human. We must allow ourselves to receive those new instructions consciously so that we can become the bridge between heaven and earth. Did you know that in order to turn into a butterfly, a caterpillar must lose all instructions for being a caterpillar? Alchemically, the caterpillar literally dissolves. It dissolves into a soup of all possibility. A caterpillar must surrender into being nothing before it can become something. And we humans must surrender into being nothing before we can become divine humans. We must surrender into being nothing. We must lose all instructions for being merely human before we can become an expression of all that is. Do you feel like soup sometimes? I do. And yet there is no higher honor. And there is nothing more ordinary or inevitable. What a blessed time to be in a body. A time when humanity must transform or perish. I'm in awe. I'm in gratitude. Profound gratitude that you are choosing to transform, to become more of yourself with me. Thank you. Namaste. I bow to you. I salute the God in you. I salute the goddess in you. We are so blessed to have come to do this together.